channel. Today we're talking about writer-director Damon McCarthy's third feature film, Hokum. And he keeps to that Irish Gothic folk horror aesthetic that he has become known for. This movie stars Adam Scott as Ohm Bauman. He's an author who is struggling to finish his latest book in a trilogy of conquistador adventures. And he decides to finally deal with his parents' ashes by visiting the Irish inn that they honeymooned at, and he figured was the last place that they were probably truly happy. When he gets to the end, he learns that the honeymoon suite is not available. It's actually blocked off, and this leads him to a lot of questions of what's going on at this particular hotel and what secrets are they hiding. I haven't seen any of Damon McCarthy's other films, such as Caveat or Oddity, so wasn't really sure what to expect from this film that he wrote and directed, and he also wrote and directed those previous films as well. The trailer was interesting. It had some unique looking character that looked like a bunny person of some kind. It could have been a mask. It could have been a creature. You don't really know what it was in the trailer. And I think that was the big selling point of the trailer, is that was open to interpretation of what the movie might be about. But the trailer, I don't know, I guess is kind of a red herring of where the movie actually goes. You do learn about Adam Scott's character, Ohm Bauman, as he's interacting with different employees of this hotel. He has a very abrasive personality. He doesn't really know how to interact with people. He's kind of a jerk to everybody he interacts at the hotel, from the bartender, Fiona, to the clerk, Mao, and especially to the bellboy, Aldi, who he has a bit of an altercation with that makes you think, should we be rooting for him or not? In the story, the way it unfolds is definitely a lot different than I was expecting for what the trailer was selling. I figured it was going to be a movie about, a witch or maybe some kind of cult or something. It does go in some places there, but not too much. I think what the biggest thing about this movie is, it's almost a comedy in some aspects, especially how it presents itself with a couple of the characters, especially Jerry, who's the recluse who lives out in the woods in his van. And there's a history with him that you come to find out that makes Ohm kind of question if he should be interacting with him or not. And what I liked was that the story didn't tell you everything right away. I think it takes a good maybe 30 minutes before you even really know what the movie's going to be about. There's a lot of build up to that, so some people might find that a little slow as you finally get to the crux of what the plot's going to be. It is kind of a whodunit or a person stuck in a haunted house type of scenario, so it tackles a couple of these areas. I think what the movie does best is the overall aesthetic and the look of it. It's very, very dark, very gloomy, but there's this kind of warmth to how it's lit, especially with a lot of the candles, some of the lanterns they use, the lighting throughout the hotel. I would say it kind of reminds me of some stuff from like Twin Peaks and this kind of saturated, dark, gothy vibe that it has going on throughout the film. And I think that's kind of the biggest selling point of this movie. And it allows, with being so saturated, especially in the blacks, for, I guess, some jump scares to be utilized a little easier without just loud noises. There's some interesting things they do with the architecture of the building. The hotel itself is very old, so some of this is utilized throughout the film for certain aspects. And I'll cover some of this stuff in the spoilers later on. But the aesthetics of this movie I really loved. It looked fantastic. I thought all the cast was great. Adam Scott is definitely well cast as Ohm, this abrasive, smarmy writer. The hotel staff is pretty unique, and I'm pretty sure all of them are like Irish actors. They all do a fantastic job. There's a scene earlier in the film with the owner of the building that kind of lays out what the movie is really about in one aspect. It does cover a few other things that is more about Ohm and some of the struggles and trauma he's dealt with in the past. And this is one of those films that I would fall in line with a trauma horror movie, which is not really my favorite genre of horror. I'm thinking of things like Bring Her Back or Talk to Me. I would put those in the category of like trauma horror, where they're all kind of allegories for loss and drug addiction. And they're super depressing and dark. And they're movies that you leave and wonder why you watched them because they are so bleak in the story they tell. This one is a trauma movie in this sense, but I guess I would say it's the fun type of trauma movie because it's more of a haunted house whodunit experience. And even though they do tackle some of the issues that Ohm is dealing with, they do it in a way that's a little bit more lighthearted and more digestible than some of these other darker films. The performances here were really great. Adam Scott plays Ohm. He's kind of this smarmy, abrasive author. You learn more about his backstory and why he could be the way he is, even though I don't know if I'd consider that an excuse. And the way he interacts with all the hotel employees, you learn to not maybe want to root for him in the beginning, but as you discover more of kind of why he is the way he is, you kind of feel for him a little bit. I think that's the strongest point of the movie in developing him as a character, slightly changing. Not he changes completely, but he does make enough change that you notice it in the end. And the other characters throughout the film are unique, interesting. I think Jerry is probably the highlight of the staff because there's some interactions between Jerry and Ohm that really help push the movie along. And while they're trying to investigate and discover what happened here at this hotel, and it does play into some of those kind of folklores of witches and the occult a little bit. I don't know if I'd put the occult in there. Maybe. There's some chalk stuff in this movie. But I definitely recommend Hokum to anybody who enjoys, I wouldn't say this movie is scary. I didn't find it scary at all. I think it relies too much on jump scares, but I did find it interesting to watch and see how the story was going to play out because it definitely moves differently than the trailer would have you expect. And there are some surprises around what is going on at this hotel that are a little bit, I guess, video game-ish. There's some scenes in this that really reminded me of Resident Evil and some of the game components of Resident Evil. Not anything with the zombies, but more around the puzzle solving and trying to get from one room to another, because there is some, I guess, trapped in a room, haunted house scenes in this film that some people could love or hate. I really enjoyed it. I liked how they dealt with one of the characters and what happened to them, especially in the end, was a little different than I've seen in other films. But the movie isn't really scary. There's some creepy parts here and there. The jump scares, I think, are a little bit too telegraphed in this movie. I can call them out. There's somebody sitting in the same row as me, maybe halfway down the theater, who jumped at every single one of them, which I thought was kind of funny. But if you enjoyed the previous movies, oddity, caveat, you're probably definitely going to like this one. If you kind of like that dark Gothic horror aesthetic, this definitely be a movie you want to see. So I'd give Hokum 3 stars. Okay, let's move on to spoilers. There are 3 areas I wanted to talk about in the spoilers. First off, there's the trauma aspect of the film, the overall story and kind of what the movie is really about, and then kind of like how it is scary and not really scary. First, the trauma aspect is you learn that Ohm accidentally killed his mother when he was 10 years old, playing with his father's gun. He shoots her in the face. And he's been dealing with a lot of guilt, especially that his father hated him for most of his life, or thought that his father hated him and didn't really care for him that much. And this comes to play, I think, a lot, especially in the story that he's writing. It's about this conquistador, treasure hunter. The movie begins and ends with the epilogue of this book he's writing. So it cuts between some scenes in the desert with these characters in his novel and him writing it. In the first opening scene is this conquistador who has a bottle where he's storing this map to a treasure for some reason. And he gets to the point where he can't get the paper out of the bottle because it's been like closed with the sand. And the only way he's able to access the paper is to break the bottle, but there's no hard surfaces in these desert dunes for him to, break it open. But he has like a assistant kid with him, and he decides that his plan is to actually break the bottle over the kid's head, which will most likely end him. And that is where he's kind of struggling with that ending. You can see that as an allegory for, maybe how he sees his father and how his father probably wishes he was dead. And then at the end of the movie, it ends with the same scene, but with a different version that he comes up with. The conquistador is about to break the bottle over the kid's head, but then he changes his mind and tells the kid to break the bottle over his head. And the kid doesn't do it. He throws the bottle, and then the conquistador and him hug. And this could be interpreted as Ohm forgiving himself and just kind of dealing with the guilt that he's been living with for the last 20, 30 years. So I really enjoyed that part. And I think that's what the movie's really about, is this Ohm trying to get over this trauma of being the one who killed his mom accidentally. And then there's the aspect of the story, because he does go to this inn, brings their ashes, and you learn some of this stuff with how he feels about his parents, with how he spreads the ashes across this tree, where he's very delicate and slowly spreading out his mother's ashes, but then he just stands up and dumps his dad's ashes across the tree, which I thought was a pretty funny scene. You don't really know that he is in this mental state where maybe he doesn't want to be around anymore. And there is a scene where Fiona, the bartender, has a bad feeling when she's trying to return some stuff to him in his room, and they break in. Well, they don't break in. Aldi, the bellboy, has a key, and so he unlocks the door, and they find him hanging from the ceiling, and they're able to cut him down. He gets to the hospital, and this is kind of where the story really starts. He gets out of the hospital. This is like a few weeks later. When they did find him, it was the night before Halloween. There was a Halloween party and Fiona went missing. So a few weeks later, when Ohm gets out of the hospital, he goes back to the hotel to get his stuff. And this is where he learns that Fiona's missing. And he wanted to thank her for saving his life because he's in a bad place. But now he's kind of intrigued why she is missing or what happened to her. So that's where the whodunit came in, is trying to discover, okay, what happened to Fiona? He ends up kind of talking to a few of the hotel employees. They're like, well, she was last seen talking to Jerry, the recluse that lives out there. So he ends up talking to Jerry. He learns from Jerry that he saw her ghost when he broke into the hotel a few nights ago, and that she is in the honeymoon suite. So then the movie moves into them trying to make sure that she's not in the honeymoon suite. They make it in there, or at least Ohm does. So he ends up getting trapped in this room upstairs. He finds Fiona's body in a dumbwaiter. Is it a dumbwaiter or a dunwaiter? I should look that up. I'm going to say it's a dunwaiter. There's a dunwaiter in this honeymoon suite, and he happens to hit the button. It comes up, and that's where Fiona's body is in her Halloween costume, which is kind of the bunny scene you see in the trailer and also in the posters. There's a recorder that he had that she was trying to return to him when she found him in his room a few weeks ago. And there's some voice recordings from her where she was having an affair with Mal, the front desk person. She was pregnant with this baby, and he's the one who actually locked her up in there, put her in this dumbwaiter, and I guess was sacrificing her to the witch that lives in the basement. Because yes, there is an actual witch in the movie who, I guess, captures people and takes them to the underworld. There's a scene at the end where she's dragging Mal into these doorways where you just see a bunch of souls, just like a dark shadows with bright eyes. So once Ohm understands, okay, what is going on there, he's trying to figure out how to get out of this room, because Mal ended up figuring out that he knew what happened, basically locked him upstairs. So Ohm can't get out. The place is pretty well boarded up. He ends up seeing that there's supposedly escape through the basement, but through these recordings, he learned there's no button to get back up the dumbwaiter if he happens to go down. And throughout the scene, there's this clock that keeps dinging on the hour. And it's basically a little boy playing golf, and he rotates and hits the bell, and that's what's making the ringing noise. This is where some of that Resident Evil kind of gameplay stuff comes in, is that he realizes, oh, if I take the bell off and it rotates on the hour, it'll hit the dumbbell button to bring me back up. And so he sets it up. He does a test to make sure it works. It works. And so this is how he's able to get down to the basement and back up. But when he's down in the basement, he realizes that the one exit that is on the map has been basically closed, built around by the newer aspects of the hotel. So it's just a brick wall. He ends up finding a piece of chalk on the ground next to a wall that has a bunch of other chalk aesthetics going on. And he also knows that there looks to be a witch down there who he kind of sees. So he runs and he gets upstairs. And this is where you see the witch kind of crawl up into the dumbwaiter and go after him. And so there's some creepy stuff around that. There's this aspect of the trailer that's not really in the movie that much. And that is the character of the person who looks like a rabbit, or some kind of creepy mask going on, and you find out this is some character from a kid's TV show that Ohm watched when he was 10 years old. You don't know if it's him seeing things or if it's actually there, but you also learn that Aldi also spiked his flask with some magic mushrooms, and so there's this interpretation that a lot of the stuff that Ohm is seeing may not be there. But he does have a discussion with Jerry at one point in the movie where Jerry says you only notice these things when your mind is open, and that is how he's able to see the witch. Some of the other stuff could be his mind just playing tricks on him, especially when it comes to that rabbit guy. That is the gist of the story, is him trying to thank Fiona, finding out she's missing, and then him getting stuck and trying to escape the witch's honeymoon suite. And you may or may not like that scenario. I thought it was an enjoyable part of the movie. I've seen some things where people didn't really like that aspect, but I do have to say the movie, at least within the third part of kind of spoiler stuff, it wasn't scary. I didn't find this movie scary at all. I found it more intriguing and just interesting to watch and see how these characters interact, because I think that's where the story is strongest, or the movie itself is strongest, is just how these characters interact with each other and how Ohm kind of changes over time. And there is a bit of goofiness to some of it, so there are some kind of lighthearted parts, especially with Jerry. He's kind of a goof and kind of a little eccentric. So the movie wasn't really scary. I thought I would put it up there with like People Under the Stairs, I guess, but not as comedy as that. Although it's been a while since I've seen that movie. I just know that that movie is not really a true horror movie. There are some horror aspects, but it's a bit more of a comedy. This one, I think, lies a little bit more into that creepiness, horror vibe than the comedy stuff, even though I do think there are some pretty funny scenes in the movie. But yeah, definitely check it out. If you like the previous director writer's work, you probably like this one as well. I really thought it was a good time at the theater. So if you've been enjoying these reviews that I have been doing, please make sure to hit that like and subscribe, because I'll be continuing